Welcome to today's event for GraphQL Texas. Today, our only talk that we have is modern content management with GraphQL, and I will introduce the speaker of that here momentarily. The event should last from about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, and it will just consist of Ivo Meißner discussing his modern content management with GraphQL and the product that he is the CEO and founder of. First, we're going to talk a little bit about Boltsource. So my name is Adam Klink. I'm the CRO of Boltsource, and my partner, Andrew Brine, we actually put these on a monthly basis. Going forward, we're going to be doing these on a quarterly basis starting in 2021, and that will consist of two separate events, one GraphQL and the other being React Native. So be on the lookout for those because we feel like we've made a really good network and have a great set of connections there. So what is Boltsource? Boltsource is a team of distributed engineers. We focus a lot on technical advising, staff augmentation, and product development. Most of our engineers that we hire and what we really focus on when hiring good, solid engineers is do they understand product? And that's the type of team that we've built so far at engineers that have helped Fortune 500 companies all the way down to seed-rounded startups. And I talked a little bit about Boltsource community. So with the Boltsource community, that typically consists of a meetup every single month of GraphQL and React. And we're going to be moving that to a quarterly basis, as I said earlier. One thing that you can do if you want to stay in contact with or our engineers or just the community in general, you can go to boltsource.io, and there is actually a Slack invite that you can be invited to our Slack developer community. So go to boltsource.io, check that out, and we look forward to connecting with you. So without further ado, I am going to turn the screen over to Ivo Meißner. He is the CEO and founder of SlickNode. So why don't you go ahead and take it from here, Ivo?
All right, thanks so much for setting up this meetup here and inviting me over. And I'm happy to share some things about SlickNode. Let me see. So it says screen sharing for participants is deactivated.
There you go. You should be good to go now. Awesome. Yeah, we can see your screen.
I just need to, how do I get this bar all the way? There's the present button. All right, so I'm going to be talking about modern content management with GraphQL. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Ivo Meißner. I'm originally from Germany, and I founded SlickNode a few years ago. I'm also a software engineer. I've been developing software since as far as I can remember. I founded a startup in Germany where I brought hyperlocal content to the internet that got later acquired by a media company called Untrusted. And since then, I've been doing a lot of consulting for software companies. I worked on startup projects and from small website to like large enterprise software architectures that's reused across different projects. And during that work, I kind of got bored because it's a lot of things are still very repetitive, and you're doing very repetitive work as a software engineer. And I always wanted to optimize that. So let's first talk, let's see what I've prepared here as an agenda. First, I'm going to talk about the challenges for content management that you usually see in today's market. Then we're going to take a look at current approaches to content management and the challenges that you have with those content management systems. And then I'm going to see how all those repetitive work, how you can automate this with GraphQL. Then It's also like traditionally right now, content management is kind of like a one-way content publishing workflow. You publish something and then people come and read it. I'll show a way how you can go beyond that and also involve the users, which comes with some challenges that are hard to solve, but also solvable, especially with today's technology that's out there. Then I'm going to show how you can combine SlickNode, the CMS platform, with existing systems. And then I'm going to show how you can use content at the edge, because when you publish something, you want to reach global audiences, needs to scale. And it's always tricky to make that work with GraphQL, and we're going to go into detail with that a little bit. Yeah, so why SlickNode? I always want to, the purpose of building software is you have an idea and you want to publish that, put it into production. And this process still takes quite a bit of time and resources. And during my work on software projects, I thought a lot of this can be automated. So I wanted to get from idea to production as fast as possible, ideally in minutes instead of months. This was the whole idea. And when Facebook open sourced the GraphQL protocol, I thought like this is an awesome technology that you can use to automate a lot of those tasks that are very repetitive and streamline your workflows. So if you look at from a content perspective, what are the demands for content management systems? Why would you need that? And how are the demands increasing with current systems? So oftentimes the content is needed in a lot of channels. So you don't only have a website, you also have mobile applications, you have smartwatches, Internet of Things devices, and also applications that you already build where you might want to add content for, be it like for help text or for error messages that you want to translate, things like that. Then content is also spread across multiple systems. Could be like in multiple microservices or third-party providers, or you already have like a blog that's sitting in some WordPress or like in another CMS. It's like scattered across an organization, and it gets hard to manage. So you might want to streamline that. But a challenge for designing a system like this is like, how do you balance the flexibility with reusability and the user experience? So for example, if you have a very flexible system, you can do all kinds of things, but then you might not be able to reuse that in another project. So it's a balancing act also between reusability and the flexibility and the user experience. If you have a system where you have like hundreds of settings and knobs that you can turn, it might not be as user-friendly, and people, especially if they don't know the system as well, or like non-technical people, might have challenge working with that. Then another challenge is the scalability and availability. Right now, social media is growing massively. You have viral marketing campaigns, potentially billions of devices that you need to serve. So like as soon as you publish something, it's potentially accessible by like all those devices, and you need to be prepared for that. So you have to have a infrastructure that scales, but you also want to keep the costs low and not have like unused resources. And especially with content management, it's publicly immediately. You could have a social influencer that shares something which you want ultimately, and then it might crash your website if you're not prepared. Another issue is you need to consider security versus flexibility. So like with content management system, you need a lot of control, because the user or the developer needs to be able to like change the structure, change database tables, create new content types, change the API. But that also comes at the expense of the security. So for example, the user that does those changes, they need to have broad permissions on the database, whereas like in enterprise systems, you would try to limit that as much as possible, so that the user that actually serves the content does not have permissions to alter tables or like write files in the file system, etc. And this is also where a lot of security vulnerabilities come from in like the WordPress world, etc. So let's look at how current CMSs might not be prepared for like some of those challenges. They do the job, and they've been doing their job for like quite a while, and people use it, and most of the web is powered by this. But let's take a closer look. So one of the problems of like the legacy CMS, or like the older CMSs, that they have hard dependency between the UI and the content itself. So you might have a template engine where you hard code like the dependency between the HTML code and your content structure. This makes it really inflexible because you can't reuse it. Like if you want to do if you want to upgrade your design, you have to set up the new system, figure out content migrations, etc. And it's like the headless CMS architecture comes to the rescue for that. Another thing that's really missing in today's CMS market mostly is that you don't really have Git workflows. You have like a system where you can create content structures and create your data model, but everyone can use this tool and do it, but you don't have the Git workflows where you can do pull requests, where you can do a code review to like check does that follow the naming conventions? Is that field even necessary? Do we have that, etc. You can't create branches easily where you like test something in isolation, or if you want to revert change in the schema of your content management system, that's also hard. You don't really have a history like who added which field. So like if you look at the content management systems admin's interface, you have this field, but you have no idea who added that, when was that added, why was that added. You can't link it to like a Jira ticket or whatever issue tracker you're using, so you can see like, oh, what was the purpose of this field. So this is the thing that we definitely wanted to address. Then cloning of environments. If you want a replicated content management system on your local machine for isolated testing or development, this can be a really challenge to do. Another thing that's often missing is the reuse and sharing of functionality. Let's say you develop some content model inside of your CMS and you want to reuse in a different project. Let's say you build a blog module with lots of fields and media, etc., and you want to reuse that in a different project. It's really hard to take it out of one project and put it into another. There's like approaches with modules, etc., and apps to install, but this all is very clunky and hard to do. And most of the times you just end up starting from scratch and doing hundreds of clicks to like reset up your data structure. Another thing that's still pretty hard is like integrating external systems. Some CMS, like the open source ones, offer then like integration tools. You can write your own plugins, etc. But you'd have to have very deep knowledge into the system. You have to learn the CMS or you do it outside of the CMS, where you have to do then all the integration work in the front end. And then the scalability, high availability, and fault tolerance are also aspects that need to be aware of. If you set up like WordPress on or another CMS, open source Drupal, Typo 3, on like a cheap instance, it's not really scalable. If you want to scale the database and have a high availability and fault tolerant installation, this takes considerable amount of setup and knowledge. And another aspect is the security. You need to keep up with the open source software, with the security updates, patches, and constantly be up to date. As we've already discussed, with the flexibility versus the power that you grant users to make changes to the system, this is another aspect you have to consider. If someone has questions, feel free to ask. If not, I'll just keep going. So let's see how SlickNode addresses all those with the design goals. The design goals for SlickNode, we wanted to have a scalable, automated infrastructure so that you don't have to set up any servers and you can quickly spin up infinitely scalable infrastructure that meets the demands of web traffic. Then we also wanted to have a modular architecture from the core that you can create content models or functionality or extensions that you can reuse across projects. So if you build similar functionality for different clients, you can just copy paste it and save enormous amounts of development resources. That's required. You need to be able to manage this via local code. So you have it on your local machine and can make all the changes. You can put it into version control with Git. You can make feature branches, merge stuff, do code review, do copy paste of model part of your application. All these things you can do with the text editor, which you can't really do with like a graphical user interface that also changes with updates, etc. Then another goal was it should be extensible with minimal knowledge so that you can add external systems. The truth is, most of the time you don't only have like this one island where you do your content. You need to pull in the external content, external functionality, etc. It also needs to integrate seamlessly with legacy software. A lot of people already use systems. For example, you already have content in one CMS. You want to be able to integrate that into your SlickNode content hub and use this, or some external software from a third-party provider that you want to use. It needs to be composable backend where you have like all the functionality and content you need and bring it together in one hub that you can also then share via copy paste and GitHub. Let's first look a quick refresher how you can create a GraphQL API with Node.js. This is typically what it looks like in very simple form. You have to like create the server, you create your resolvers, and then you create your type definitions, your schema, and then you go ahead and implement all the logic. But even if you have the server, you're far from done if you want to have a production-ready GraphQL API. So what you usually do is define a schema, implement resolvers with data fetching logic, which can be like the most very complex endeavor depending on your data. Then you got to set up data storage, models, DB, set up connections, certificates, credentials, etc. Then you have to do network configuration, configure a firewall, etc. You have to do authentication, authorization, who's allowed to change what, define permission rules. Then especially for GraphQL, you have to protect your server that someone can't run arbitrary queries and like take down your database. We actually open sourced a library to prevent this for Node.js applications, like the most popular library for doing that. You can check it out on SlickNode on GitHub. Then you need to set up deployments, CI pipeline, infrastructure setup with monitoring, logging, load balancing, content delivery network, etc. So it's like quite a task to just get a high quality content infrastructure set up, and this is what we want to address with SlickNode. And let's take a look at the SlickNode development workflow. It looks a little different. So I think if you can just use GraphQL, you don't need to learn any language. You can use it with any front-end technology. All you have to know is GraphQL. So like we define your schema, and then you can define your field, like in the GraphQL schema definition language. Then you run with the command line utility, you run a command, you can deploy it. You can deploy different environments. You have like a staging, a test, and a prod. And then you're done. You have your GraphQL API, you have your CMS set up, and you have a content management infrastructure. So let me show this what that looks like in code. Other questions so far? No questions? All right. So let's see. Let's open up a new tab here. So to get started with SlickNode, you can you install the SlickNode CLI. You can just install it via npm. I already have it on my computer here, so I'm going to skip that step and I'm going to initialize a new project. SlickNode init GraphQL Texas demo. So what this does now, it creates a new project. First, it authenticates, loads the available cluster, it creates the project. And after a few seconds, so now the GraphQL API is ready. And let's look what it actually created as code. It's like I started from scratch here. You can also start with the starter package, which I can show in a second. But let's start from scratch. Oh, there's a folder that should not be there. Okay. So here, it creates a SlickNode YAML file and the root folder. And this is where you define all the dependencies. This is where all the modules are linked that are part of your project. So there's 3 modules that are already installed by default. One auth module, which includes like user management, authentication. Then there's relay for relay support. It generates a relay compatible GraphQL API out of the box. And there's the core module, which contains the base types, etc. And that's pretty much it. Then we have a SlickNode RC file. There's a default environment defined. We can also have then other environments for prod, staging, etc. But we'll leave that here for now. And so let's check out the terminal. So now if you want to add more modules, we can just use install them via the SlickNode command. So I do SlickNode module add. Let's say you want to add image support or file support. And we also want to have content management support, versioning, translation, etc. So we also install a content module, kind of let you install NPM modules. I'm just going to install this here. So now it added those dependencies here in my SlickNode YAML file. And now to push those changes to the cloud, I just do SlickNode deploy. And so now it checks my local version, compares that with the state and the cluster. It says like, oh, do you want to add all those types here? So like, yeah, sure, go ahead. It deploys the changes. And now once that is done, I have CMS with image support, automatic resizing, file support, and content management. Okay, so now we have like some core modules installed. Let's build something ourselves. Let's say we want to build, create a new module. So like everything can be installed in modules. Let's say you want to build a blog. SlickNode module create blog. And then ask me like, what's the namespace for the module? This is going to be prepended to all the types. Then what's going to be called in the admin interface. And now it created a private module, which is inside of this folder here. And then I can go ahead, and here I have my first module. Right now, there's not much going on. We just have an ID, a label, and the namespace, and we have an empty schema file. And here, inside of the schema, we can just go ahead and add some types. And we have to add, let's add a post, for example. And you just write it in the schema definition language. If you want to persist it to database, to tell SlickNode to create a database table and migrations, etc., you have to implement the node interface and give it an ID. So this is the bare minimum, and then you add one text. When you say like title, string, then you can just start adding your fields. Now let's say we have a post. We also want to add content management functionality with version management, etc. Then we have to implement the content interface. That has like a few fields that you have to add inside of this interface here. What I always do is like I have a little snippet defined here, and to just create those fields automatically, so I can super fast create my types here. And then I'm just going to change the type name to log post. And then I'm going to add my types here. Title, string, teaser, string. And then we can also say like we have a text component, which has string, input type, markdown. For example, you can define like what input element is going to be used for this field. We already have like here created, add, last updated, add, etc. This will be populated automatically by SlickNode. And let's say we also want to have an image here, and then we also want to have a slug for the URL friendly identifier. we're going to make this unique, so it adds a unique index on this content type. So I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to run SlickNode deploy, see if I made any errors here. So now it's validating my local schema, compares that with the changes in the cloud, and says like, here, you want to add this module and add this type. Like, sure, go ahead, deploy this. So now it's deploying the changes, and we're successful. So now I've deployed my changes, and let's see what this looks like in the console. You can open this up. You can also open it up via the web browser, but on the console, let's go straight to my project here. And now we have an admin interface that we can use to create blog posts here. So here we have our blog posts, and there's no results. So we're going to add a blog post, and it automatically creates this content management interface here based on my content model. So I have the title here. GraphQL is awesome. GraphQL is awesome. So we can add some stuff here. We can select an image. Let's select an image here. Oh, let's have this screenshot here. It's just some random image, some teaser content. So now here I can't do a line break, but we can fix that in a sec. We just have to configure the input field, and here we have our rich text field. And then we can do rich text, etc. We can do a preview. Okay, so now I can save this. Now this is in draft status. So like you have this draft and you have a publish track, and you can work on your content, and only when you're ready to publish it, you can publish it. Say like here, as some changes are not published yet, so like publish, should change status to published. You can also create different statuses like review, QA, translation, etc. And you publish it, and now the content is published, and we can query this with the GraphQL API. So here, if we want to get like a list of posts, this is the GraphQL API that's automatically generated here based on the content model. So like your text, title, teaser, you can query this, and here you get your GraphQL results. Also with the relay compatible connection with pagination, filtering, etc. So you can do filter, node, published, add, greater than, etc. You get the idea. So here we have our response, and then you also have, if you want to get the image, you want to get the URL, and say you want to have it with the height of 300 pixels. We run this query, and then here it automatically generates the thumbnail, the URL with the thumbnail, which is automatically scaled. You can say resize method, crop smart, fit, etc. All this stuff. So you have this GraphQL API. And you automatically get the publishing interface here, where you can add, update posts, and update your content. Other questions so far? All right, then now let me show you a few little things that you can do with the content management modeling functionality. For example, it has like support for the full GraphQL standard. So I can define my own interfaces here. For example, interface, blog, meta text. For example, if you want to define meta text, it's always the same. So like title, type string, then keywords, string, and then description. So if we want to implement, we can implement this in our types here, and then enforce the validation of the interface. So like if we save this and do SlickNode deploy, it will validate if all those fields are there. So for example, it says interface field, meta text keywords expected, but blog post does not provide it. So it does the validation, and then we can add those fields and create like interfaces that makes it a lot easier to develop reusable components in the front end. I'm just going to remove this for now here. Another thing that you can do is you can use, you can create union types. So what I oftentimes do for websites, for example, I create different content types. Let's say we have a text content type, which is like content of type string. And then we can create another one. So like we call this blog. Let's say we write blog about code and we want to create an element where we render a code editor inside of the blog post. Then we can say, or here, this is the code of type string. And then let's say we want to define the language. And then we want to create an enum, etc. blog code language. I'll select here GraphQL, another JavaScript, etc. And we can use this here. And basically just write down our schema. And now we have those content blocks. What you can do then is you can create a union type. So like union blog content. And this can be of type, we got blog text, or it can be blog code editor. Save this, SlickNode deploy. Let's see if I messed up somewhere. So let's make those changes, yes. And you can see you can very easily iterate on your schema, create content and create very flexible content models. Then here, if we want to create the content field, so like we create a content field, let's say it's of type array of that content model here, blog content. And then we deploy this. Then we have a modular content builder, which you can also use for pages, etc. So you can dynamically add different content types. Let's open this up in the, well, there's some DB constraint, or here, it has like very strict validation. So here we have this make required, but you already have some data in there, so it can't be non-null. So we just remove the required flag and redeploy, and there we go. So now we have our deployment successful. Let's reload the console, and here we see our blog post. And now we have here our content field, where we can say we want to create a new let's say code editor. It's like here, it's the code type, whatever, and then we select the language GraphQL, publish this, move this to published, and here we have our content type, and then we can add some text, move this to published, and we can like move this, etc., and then create very flexible content model types here. We can publish this. And if we move to the IDE, we can then go to list blog posts. And then here we can flexibly load the content. Here on the code editor, we haven't selected any code, and you have the GraphQL API. All right, so this is how fast and quickly you can move things. And if you want to reuse that block, then in another application, all you have to do is copy paste this folder and then link it in your dependencies, and you're done. So it's like really easy to create complex data models, reuse them across applications, or you can share them on the internet. Let's say create content models for the whole Tailwind CSS library as a community, and then everyone can clone that and then go from there and customize. Let me go back to my presentation. All right, let's go back to the presentation here. One other thing with current content management systems is that usually it's a one-way publishing flow. So you publish something and people can come and look at it, but you can't really engage in it. There's like a lot of use cases that you can't build with this, and that are really awkward right now, especially when it comes to making this scalable. So why would you want two-way content management? So you can build entire user communities with comments, with reviews, or at the biggest websites, they're all communities where people can log in, they can communicate, and you build them this channel where people can come to your website and contribute and engage. So it's like a whole other class of application you can build. It can be like customer portals for premium content that you want to sell. You want to show them their internal invoices that you sent them, or have service tickets, things like that. The possibilities are endless. Then you can build SaaS applications where you define like which users integrate, like log into your platform, which content are they allowed to see, only their own content. We built like a multi-tenant SaaS application, for example, for a customer that wanted to have like a content management application to optimize articles, descriptions, and optimize them for the Amazon marketplace. And they built like all those integrations with like managing this in SlickNode and then pushing it to the Amazon marketplace to be live online there. Then you can use it, as I described this example, it's like custom content infrastructure, where you have custom business requirement. For example, there you needed a custom workflow with like review and publish and then send it to the Amazon API. This is all possible with SlickNode. But as soon as you allow untrusted users to access your system, there's a whole host of other challenges that you need to solve. So number one, authentication is like, who is this that's talking to my website? What are they allowed to do? The authorization part. Then you need to add security layers and access controls, like what specific content are they allowed to access? Can they update, delete this, etc. Then another challenge is solving the caching problem versus personalization. If you cache one response for one customer and another user can't see that same response, there might be sensitive data that's exposed. And SlickNode solves this in a really easy way. You can do type-based authorization control that you can define also in your local code. So you can use also GraphQL. You don't need to learn anything else. And there's also an editor I can show in a sec. And you can use the user ID and then define the role. So here you have the scope. It's like for the role staff, they can do create, update, and delete on the blog article type. And then you can apply filters. You can say they're only allowed to create, update, and delete articles of type author where the ID is equal to the user ID. And you can use the entire filter system that's available on SlickNode across multiple tables. And this is fully integrated into the query engine to apply those permissions at query time, which makes it really easy and also secure to define those rules, because like no matter where in the API that type is exposed, those permissions will automatically be applied. Let me show this in practice here. Also in our little blog application, by default, it creates for every type, it creates a permission document. For example, anonymous users allowed to read, but they can't do anything else. Then staff users can also create, update, and delete. And then we have runtime. This is for extensions that you write. They have permission then to create, update, delete, and read. And you can customize this for every type. You can commit this to source control, do code reviews. And there's also an editor which simplifies this. How do I get this out the way here? So if you go into settings, there's a permissions manager where you can just like say here for our blog post, we want to define the filters, and then you can use the GraphQL, like this Explorer here, and say created at equal to, and then use the user ID here. And you can create complex rules here, any level deep. So let's say we're created at, it's like, or created at, I meant to use created by, sorry about that. create the ID is equal to the user ID. And then you can also add multiple rules where the user is active, true. And write complex permission logic, which you would usually have to implement at the application layer. You just define them per type for the query engine, and they will be automatically applied. So those are, this is how you can manage permissions and also allow untrusted user access to your content. Let's go back to the presentation. Any questions so far? No? All right. So let's see how you can extend SlickNode. You have this GraphQL API, you can build custom data models. You have the UI where you can manage the content, but oftentimes you need to bring in external services, or you already have a GraphQL application and you just want to add the content layer. Let's see how that works. Let's have a look at the architecture a little bit. We have the GraphQL API here, where devices can access the API gateway. And then SlickNode is powered with 100% serverless stack. So you have Lambda functions that are deployed for each API, which scales amazing. Like we've been running for like over a year production and didn't have a single second of downtime so far. So it's very convenient. And then the database is also serverless. It's not just the application layer, but also the serverless. We're using serverless Aurora for this. And then those Lambda functions, they can call custom extensions. I'll show them a little bit what this looks like. And within those extensions, you can write custom Node.js code. You can like call databases, load content from there. You can call third-party APIs. And if you don't want to write those extensions and you already have a GraphQL API, you can embed an entire GraphQL API with a few lines of code and have this available inside of your SlickNode graph. And you can add like several GraphQL APIs, which makes it really easy. Like if you have an existing GraphQL API, just add the content layer and you're good to go. Or if you want to build something on top of another GraphQL API, let's say you have a Shopify, the storefront, they have GraphQL, and you want to create a modular page builder, you can use this entire storefront API with all the updates that they do without you doing anything. And then you add the content management functionality of SlickNode on top. There are different ways how you can extend this. So for one, the GraphQL APIs that I've said, merge third-party GraphQL APIs or your own into the schema graph. Then you can also use Apollo Federation, which is a method to merge multiple GraphQL APIs into a single one. It's a protocol that was developed by the guys from Apollo. Then you can also write custom resolvers. You can add custom fields to your GraphQL API that load basically any data. You can call your own database. You can call your own microservices, which gives you like all the flexibility that you need. And you can attach this directly on your content. You don't have to write afterwards integration code in your content, fetching logic that you have to merge, etc. This simplifies your front ends significantly. Another thing that you can do with extensions, you have listeners or like web event hooks that listen to API events to trigger actions. So you can intercept mutations for data validation, advanced authorization, or you can stream that data to other systems. For example, pub subtopics, search, etc. So you can, whenever someone writes a comment, you publish to pub subtopic and then do fraud protection and email notifications. This kind of stuff is very flexible. So let's look what the remote modules look like. Basically, you just define in your SlickNode YAML of that module, you can define the endpoint, load the GraphQL API, and you can add authorization headers, etc. And then you have your GraphQL API. Another way to do this is via Apollo Federation. You can, if you already have an Apollo Federation API gateway, you can just add SlickNode as an additional microservice if you want to add that content to your Apollo Federation gateway. And all you have to do is add that module, deploy it, and then you're done. There's nothing else needed. Then you can write custom resolvers. You just define the schema. You can extend other types. You can also extend types from other GraphQL APIs that you extended. So you can pretty much extend any type that is inside of the schema. And all you have to do is like you define the schema, the input arguments, the return type, and then you say which file, which handler executes the code. And then you just write a simple JavaScript function where you can call any APIs, write business logic, etc., and then hook that into your content management hub. Another thing you can use is you can extend external data structures. Let's say you bring in your Shopify storefront, the product, and you want to add images from the SlickNode Content Hub. What you can do is you can create relations between types from external systems and merge them into your graph. So here, this is all it takes to create an image gallery for Shopify products, and you can use then the entire data modeling capability of SlickNode to accomplish this, which makes it really easy to extend existing GraphQL APIs that you want to expose, for example, for a website or portal or other things. Let me show you real quick a remote module demo. So if I go into, let's open up the projects here. So this is here one project I created in advance. So what we did here at SpaceX, there's the public SpaceX API available. And here we have one SlickNode module. It just has the core modules, and it has two custom modules. One is the SpaceX API, and it just defines the endpoint here. And then we add the schema here. We can also say like, oh, we don't want to expose the address type and remove that. That will also be possible. So you can expose partial schemas. But here it's just the entire SpaceX API. And then inside of our blog module, let's say we're making a blog about SpaceX launches. We create our blog posts, and then we have our data models here with our data, etc. And here we can extend the SpaceX types, which are in the other module. So this way you have flexibility to extend external GraphQL APIs and add content. So here for the SpaceX launches, we just add a list of posts, and we can merge them then. This is the convention of SlickNode. You can create joins between the external SpaceX types and our blog post, which is internal to SlickNode. And SlickNode automatically generates then a relay-compatible GraphQL API and applies all the permission logic, etc., which makes it a really powerful tool to super easily extend GraphQL APIs. So let's look what this looks like in the API. Let's go to the playground here. Schema is loading here. Come on. Okay, so now we have our SpaceX. Let's say on the missions, we have the name, and then here we have our blog posts. Let's say we want to show the text and title of the blog post. So the blog post is coming from SlickNode, and SpaceX is coming from the public SpaceX API. Now if I fire this query, it loads the posts from the SlickNodes, the missions from the SpaceX API, and then merges that with our blog posts. And one other thing is like, as you can see, the response is super fast. This is cached in the GraphQL CDN. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. So if you see here, we have content from multiple systems that are merged in the GraphQL response. And then here we have a response time of 50 milliseconds. This is not local. This is like the actual API. So this makes it really, really good to extend and build content APIs with multiple systems and bring them together with SlickNode. All right, let's go back. There's another way to extend things is you can create listeners. This is like a diagram of what it looks like. If you have a mutation, you can add business logic before and after, where you can put any business logic. You just write simple JavaScript code. So you can do extended validation, validate data with an external system, for example, to implement a reCAPTCHA if you have like public forms, etc. Or if you want to stream data to an Elasticsearch cluster or into your Kafka stream or whatever you're using, you can say like after create a post, then send it to my search index, for example. It's very flexible. Here, this is what it looks like. You just define the event, and then you say which JavaScript code it should execute. And then you just write a simple JavaScript function where you can do validation. For example, here you get the payload with the input argument, and then here just validate, does it end with slicknode.com? I say only users with SlickNode can sign up. But here you can add custom code, which makes it really flexible and powerful. Any questions so far? Okay. Now let's see how we can bring this whole technology, this whole data and content to the edge. With GraphQL, there are quite a few challenges to solve when you want to bring content to the edge and make it scale. For one, oftentimes you're using post requests because just because of the size of the request, and you need the payload of the request that is sent, and that's oftentimes not compatible with the existing CDNs. So it's hard to cache. Then another challenge is you have to cache based on the request body. You can't just say like, well, this URL always returns this data like you would with the REST API, because for the same URL, you can have any number of responses based on the query. Another thing that's very challenging is you have multiple resource types in a single response, and they're dynamic. So if you write a GraphQL query, as we've seen like with the SpaceX API and the blog posts, if you write those queries and load the data, there's data from multiple content types in that response that is potentially cached. So like we need to have a way to update this or invalidate the cache as soon as the data is updated. So cache invalidation is a challenge to solve. Then also, if you invalidate responses and you invalidate, for example, a huge amount of requests, you need to have a scalable origin infrastructure that can scale on demand when this data invalidates, so it can serve all the requests that are coming in and they're not protected by the caching layer anymore. So this is where the Lambda and the serverless infrastructure comes in really handy. Another challenge is you have to cache based on the user. So like if you have untrusted users, as we've seen with the authorization module, if someone requests like the viewer object, which returns the current user, you can't cache this because it's the user changes based on who is making that request. So those are challenges that come along if you want to cache GraphQL responses. And let's see how SlickNode solves this. So there's like typical CDN setup. You have your user here, which is somewhere in the world. It is then connected to the closest edge location. And then here inside of this edge location, there's a multi-layered cache that checks first, like on that node where the user connected, if the content is in memory. If it is, you get a super fast response time, as you've seen with the SpaceX API, for example. If not, it checks if it's available inside of this data center. If it's not available there, it goes to a caching layer at the origin, which kind of works as a shield. If it's available there, it will be returned to the edge and to the user without hitting the database and the origin, which makes it really fast. So if the same user, or if like another user requests the same request from this edge location, it still won't hit the, it will go to the origin region, to this caching shield, but still won't hit the database, which is still pretty fast. and then the cache will be stored on this edge location. So you have a really scalable, really fast infrastructure that can serve your GraphQL responses to global audiences, and all just by running SlickNode deploy, pretty much. So this is the caching infrastructure that lies underneath and that creates this those incredibly low response times and latencies. Okay, now this was like, I want to wrap up with just showing a few deployment options that are available for SlickNode. So there's a shared cluster on demand where you still get all the benefits like of all the scalable infrastructure without having to invest too much money and without having to create this infrastructure yourself. So it's like for startups, rapid prototyping, small to medium websites, productivity tools, etc. And then there's also an option to have dedicated infrastructure for enterprise workloads where you want to build high traffic websites, or also if you want to use this infrastructure to like create multi-tenant SaaS application with thousands of projects. This is also very suitable because the cost of spinning up a Lambda function is pretty low. So if this is something that's interesting, depending on your use case, this is also something that's possible. Or if you have high volume data, this is the way that would be the most suitable for the use case. Okay, quick summary. GraphQL, it's a really great technology for modern digital experiences. No matter which technology or CMS you're using, it just makes developing front-end applications so much easier and faster and more consistent and type safe and documented and all those other benefits. And it also comes at a cost because it's really hard to build. And with SlickNode, we want to solve a lot of those hard problems, like quickly creating content architecture, data models, databases, the caching problem across the globe, then the scaling issues you usually face with public APIs and all the infrastructure setup. This is what SlickNode can solve for you. And then also combining multiple services via GraphQL, it can have dramatic productivity gains, and it's very flexible because you can reuse so many different components and external systems, and you have a type-safe API which really integrates very well and makes your investment into GraphQL future-proof just because it's type-safe, documented, and open source. All right. So I'm done with my talk. I hope this worked. If there are questions.
Awesome. Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot. Do we have any questions? All right. Doesn't look like we have any questions coming in. So yeah, thanks a lot for stopping by and having this talk with us. We are going to post this. I'll get this posted either today or tomorrow. I'll get it posted on like LinkedIn. I can share the video with you as well, so you can distribute it as well to your audience and market. But yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on here.
Yeah.
Giving the opportunity to present this. And yeah, if you want to check it out, check out SlickNode. It's free for development accounts and small websites. You can just play around with it. Setup is really easy. There are starter kits, etc. And I would love to hear your feedback and what you build with it. If you have questions, there's a Slack channel on slicknode.com where you can reach me. Just connect. There's a community. I would love to hear feedback and see what you build with it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll, like I said, we're thinking we need to throw a CMS on our current website. So we may do that with SlickNode.
Awesome. Yeah, let me know if you need help or have questions. I'm happy to help out there.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, have a good rest of your day and stay safe and healthy out there.
Thank you. You too.
All right. See you guys.
All right. See you.